guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be my November reading wrap-up, and I'm very excited because I was able to read 9 books in November. This is in no particular order. I just arranged them in size so I could do the thumbnail, but they're not in the order that I read them. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is I Know Who You Are by Alice Finney. This book had so much potential. I really enjoyed Sometimes I Lie by her. I think that was her debut novel. So when I saw that this book was available on Book Outlet, I decided to get it. But this book was such a disappointment. The premise of this book was really interesting. We follow this lady who is a very unreliable character. We follow 2 timelines: her now as she's being accused of killing her husband, and then her as a young child and reliving all the trauma and the abuse that she went through as a child. I don't want to say what it was so as to not to spoil the story. And so as we learn more about her background and the trauma that she lived as a child, you kind of understand why she's such an unreliable narrator, and you start to distrust her, which is something that I really enjoy when I'm reading a thriller, because then you don't know what to think. So I don't think that whole plot line was necessary. Therefore, it kind of turned me off. Of course, it happened towards the end of the book when the revelation, when they reveal that. So yeah, it kind of took a turn for the worst there, and it just kind of went downhill, and I didn't really care for the ending. It wasn't satisfying enough for me. I just gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read was Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare et al. This is a book that has, I want to say, oh my goodness, it had a lot. I want to say it has about 11 or 12 short stories. And I really enjoyed it. This is mainly not the main character, but most of the stories have to do with Jem. If you guys read the Infernal Devices, you guys know that Jem, it was my favorite character from that series. And so I really enjoyed the fact that he was in here a lot. They're short stories. I really can't say much because it's the, what number is this? I don't know, it's book like 15 out of the whole like Mortal Instruments, Infernal Devices, Dark Artifices type series. But it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There were a couple of stories that I really didn't care for. But there were others that I just wish had been a little bit longer because I enjoyed them so much. So really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of the whole Mortal Instruments series, I think these books add to the characters that we already know. It feeds into their arc stories. So I really enjoyed it. I gave it, like I said, I think 4 out of 5 stars. Then I also read Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, and I watched the show. I went to watch the show, so that's why I read the book. It's just, you know, the book before the show. And I really enjoyed it. I have to say I enjoyed the book a little bit better than the movie. Than the show, just because the show, they do change a few things. I guess the show had a little bit more of a satisfying ending than the book. The book ending made me angry. If you guys have read it, you know why. Just because I just felt like it wasn't fair. Whereas the show ending, they redeemed some of the characters. I guess not to make them so hateful as they are in the book. But I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I hated some of the characters. I was just mad and angry. But the show, I think, redeemed some of those characters. But I still like the book. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend. The next book that I want to talk about is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware writes thrillers. No, let's see. She writes thrillers, and they're not like the scariest of scary books, but somehow I keep coming back to reading everything she's ever written. But in this book, we follow this girl who is who was hired to become a nanny for this rich family that lives out in nowhere in Scotland. She's writing letters to a lawyer who she hopes will represent her because she has been accused of murdering one of the children that she babysat. She was a one of those nannies that live in the house. So yeah, we she's telling the whole story from the beginning, from how she was hired to the end, to this lawyer. And I really enjoyed it. A lot of the times I kind of forgot that we were reading letters to a lawyer. It just felt like she was just telling, like it just felt like you were living in the moment when she was telling the story, but actually she was recalling all the things that happened. And I'm really bad at seeing twists and things at the end, which is not a bad thing. I think it helps me enjoy stories and books better. Um, yeah, the twist that happened at the end, I did not see it coming. I read this super fast. I was actually listening to this on audiobook during orientation for my new job. You know, they make you I was doing orientation online, because of the whole pandemic. You're not allowed to go to the hospital itself to do the orientation. So everything we were doing online. So I was listening to this on the background as I was doing that. So I listened to this in one day. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I think it's probably my favorite one, or close to my favorite one, from Ruth Ware. The next book that I read was Dry by Neil Shusterman and Jared Shusterman. I think that's his son. But in this book we follow, what is it called? Alyssa and her family. She lives in Southern California, and the drought has been going on for a really long time. And we follow how people become desperate to get some water. You know, the government is doing the best they can to control who gets water, how much water, but things are getting so bad that people are starting to turn against each other trying to find some water. So this book was very reminiscent of the Gone series by Michael Grant. Those are 7 books. This is just one book, so it was kind of like a condensed version. But you know, you have the same of, you know, people are living in hard times. The government is trying to take over. The families disappear. The kids go out to try to look for the families that are missing. Very eye-opening, because it feels like it could happen because of the way the world is right now, especially our country. It feels like it could happen any moment. So it was very, very scary that way, because it was so realistic. This is another book that I read within 24 hours. I started it one afternoon and I stayed up super late reading it, and then I finished it the next morning. It was really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Highly, highly recommend. If you're into like those dystopian-ish books, but you don't want to read a series, I think this is a really good one. Next, I read One of Us is Lying. No, One of Us is Next by Karen M. McCannis. This is actually the sequel to One of Us is Lying. I thought the sequel to One of Us is Lying was Two Can Keep a Secret, but I guess that's just like an accompany novel. And this is the actual sequel. I honestly don't remember much about One of Us is Lying, and I think that affected my enjoyment of this book. This book kind of had a Gossip Girl like aspect feel to it. In One of Us is Lying, we're trying to find out who was the person responsible for the death of a teenager at this high school. And in this book we follow some of the kids that were involved in the mystery from the first book. They're kind of being blackmailed by this app that is a game of truth or dare. So either you accept the dare, and if you fail to do it, there's consequences, and if you choose truth, then they kind of want to ruin you for telling the truth about something about yourself, kind of like exposing you. So like I said, in this book we followed some of the kids that were involved in the first book. But like I said, I didn't remember much about the first book that I think that affected my enjoyment on this book. I wasn't really attached to any of the characters. I didn't really care for the story. And I remember really being really involved and really feeling like a sense of like a thriller type while reading the book, like, oh, this is kind of creepy, but I didn't feel that with this. So for that reason, I only gave it 3 stars. Maybe I need to read the first book to kind of refresh my memory, or at least read a synopsis of what happens in the first one, and then give this one a second chance. But for now, it was an okay book. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read also probably my least favorite book out of everything I read this month, and unfortunately is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I purchased this book because I had heard from everywhere that this was an amazing book. It has stellar reviews on Goodreads, and I was like, there's no way that I'm not gonna like it. But I didn't know that this was a magical realism genre. Is that what it is? A genre? I don't know why, just magical realism, certain magical realism, I just don't get it. Maybe it's because this is like a highly regarded piece of literature and I just like trash. I don't know. But in this book we follow, what is her name? Dana. She's an African American woman who is married to a white man in the 80s, I want to say, maybe. But somehow she's able to travel back in time, back in the 1800s, and being a black woman, she is assumed to be a slave. And she, as we learn about the story, she travels back in time. Every time she travels back in time is to save this one person who is in trouble. It's the same person. We follow them when they're in trouble as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, grown man. And every time he's in trouble, like something like flips a switch in her and she goes back in time. And I just felt like that whole exposition where she tells her husband like, oh, I can travel back in time and save people that need me. I just felt like the husband really, like, he accepted that like right away. He was like, okay, well, let me go with you. And then he goes with her. And I don't know, maybe I just missed the whole point of the story, but I just felt like the way that the husband accepted the time travel as if it was something out of the norm. I never really understood why she was the one who needed to help. Like, spoiler maybe, I knew they were related, but like why her? Like, what was the whole point of her going back and then suffering? That I will tell you, it's very graphic. Because it's the 1800s, slaves had no rights, no nothing. So the part where she is treated as a slave, it's really heart-wrenching and it's hard to read because it's very graphic, and I'm sure that that's how it was. But I don't know, I was disappointed. I was hoping to really enjoy this book and I didn't. Maybe I was expecting something completely different, but yeah. The next book that I have here is China Rich Girlfriend by Kevin Kwan. This is a sequel to Crazy Rich Asians, and I didn't like it as much, unfortunately. I think Crazy Rich Asians should have been just a standalone. And I feel like this was a forced sequel just because the first one was really good. I enjoyed it, not as much as the second one. We follow Rachel and what is his face? I mean, his name. I want to call him Kevin, but I feel like that's wrong. They're planning their wedding, meeting more family members, and a whole bunch of drama ensues while they're trying to arrange their wedding. It was a fun read, but it wasn't as fun as the first one. It didn't make me laugh as much as the first one. I don't have Rich People Problems, which is the third one, but I hope that I get it soon. That way I can have the whole trilogy completed. And then last but not least, I finally read The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I was really, really excited because I love The Handmaid's Tale. I love the show. And I know that this book came out, was it last year that came out or maybe the year before? I don't remember. But it was finally on Book Outlet and I was like, oh, let me get it. And so I grabbed it and I really enjoyed it. It wasn't what I was expecting it to be. I thought this book was going to be like years later, like decades later, when Gilead had fallen and we were living in a world post Gilead beliefs, like where the whole system had fallen. But this is kind of like the book in between that. So I feel like if she made a third book, that's what the book would be about. This book, we follow, it's been a few years later. We have 3 narrators. We have Aunt Lydia, who's telling one side of the story, and it's very, very obvious that it's her. Like I could tell it was her right away. And then we have two young girls telling the story. One, I knew who she was. Like I kind of had it, like I was like 95% sure it was her, but I had my doubts. I don't want to say who it was in case you haven't read this book. But then the third narrator, I did not see that coming. Not at all. I thought she was just another person who had been brainwashed by, you know, the beliefs that Gilead raises their young girls to believe. So when they revealed who she was, I was like, I literally gasped out loud. I remember I was walking the dogs and I was listening to this on audiobook, and I was just walking and I was just like, oh, when I heard who it was. So it was a pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed this book, and this book left me wanting more. At the end, I just wanted to know what was gonna happen, like kind of open-ended, and it makes you wonder like all these different possibilities that can happen for the third book. I don't know if she's planning on writing a third book, but my mind was already going like, oh my gosh, I just hope she doesn't wait 35 years again to write a sequel like she did with this one. But I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I don't remember, 4 or 5, can't remember. Really enjoyed it. Highly, highly, highly recommend. So there you have it, guys. Those are the books that I read in the month of November. I am going to be participating in the Tis the Season-a-thon that is hosted by Bookables. I do it every year, and it's nice because it's kind of like Christmassy books that we read. So hopefully I can read a good chunk of books, and maybe that's all I'll read in December, just that readathon at the beginning of the month. But we'll see. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this wrap up for November. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.